This is Cold War Conversations. If you're new here, you've come to the right place to listen to first-hand Cold War history accounts. Do make sure you follow us in your podcast app or join our emailing list at coldwarconversations.com. In February 1983, US soldier Manuel Alzaga was sent to a mysterious posting in the British zone in the north of West Germany, a long way away from the main US forces in southern Germany. After a lengthy journey, he's picked up by a German private and eventually arrives at the 81st US Army Field Artillery Detachment, where his mission is to guard, assemble and deliver low-yield nuclear artillery rounds to the West German Army. He describes how the rounds were assembled, as well as the orders in the event of unauthorised intruders, and much more. Being stationed in the British zone, Manuel also tells us about the love-hate relationship with the British, where they would fight, make up, drink and fight again. You can catch up with Manuel's 2 other episodes with me via the links in the episode information. I'm delighted to welcome Manuel to our Cold War conversation. So you go back to Fort Riley, but then you get offered you weren't offered, you were given orders to return back to Germany.
We got back sometime mid-October 82, and we got a few days off, and that was nice. And then we went back to our daily routine, which is basically, you get up, you do PT in the morning, you go to chow, you have inspection, you have training for the day, or you go to the motor pool, work on your vehicles. And I remember being called out to the BC's office, the battery commander, and it's like, oh man, what'd I do? And I reported, sir, Special Sergeant reporting as ordered. Addie's, well, you're going back to Germany. Oh, no, he said, did you like Germany? I know you did. He told me that because I did. And I said, yes, sir, absolutely. He said, well, guess what? You're going back. And I'm like, yeah. And he handed me my orders. I had I think it was a 4-month notice. They usually used to give you 4 months or more. If you were married, they'd give you more of a advance notice, but I was single and enlisted and lower rank. So, I think it was like 3 or 4 months, and then you ship out. So it must have been around Super Bowl time of 1983 that I went home on leave for about 2 to 3 weeks. And then I flew via commercial airlines from Los Angeles to St. Louis. And then they told me in St. Louis, when I showed them my orders, I had to be in uniform, and they got really mad. And I'm like, what? Yeah, troop, you better go back and put on you. So I had to dig out my backpack, my duffel bag, and I put on my uniform. And then it was a chartered commercial flight from St. Louis to Philadelphia to Rhein-Main again, or somewhere in Frankfurt. And then we were bused. And this was all individual soldiers with orders. And I got back to Rhein-Main probably in February or March of 83. And this time I was going to be assigned there, and back in those days, it was at least a 2-year tour, I think, 18 months to 2 years if you were a single private. And I was fine with that. So I got there, went through the whole process. They asked me one day if I had any problems working with nukes. And this is a 21st Replacement Detachment in Frankfurt. And I'm like, no. Okay. So maybe a little bit later, they cut me my orders and said, you're going up north.
That question, have you got any problem working with nukes? Were they asking whether you had any problems ideologically there? Or what was that question?
Okay, let me see if I remember. I think it was more like if I had any kind of philosophical disagreements with the use of nuclear weapons or nuclear energy at the time, because, that was a big thing in America. No nukes, we don't want nuclear energy, that's wrong. Yeah. I didn't care. I was 19 or 20 by now, and I didn't care. And I said, no. But it didn't make sense to me until they gave me my orders and said that I was going to go up north and I was going to be assigned to a nuclear unit.
Yeah, it's just it was an interesting question because, you know, the impression I get, I've never been in the army, as you can tell, but I would.
I have no idea. You know more about it than I do.
Well, I just read rather dull books a lot. The impression I get is in the army, you're just told where to go. You don't question it, and you're not offered an option. It's sort of like, we need you to go to this place and do this job. So that's why I'm surprised about being asked whether you had an objection to nuclear weapons. But I think you've explained it well, that there was a lot of noise at that time, both in Europe and in the US, about nuclear energy, because it was 3 Mile Island, wasn't it, during the 80s?
Right.
Or something.
And then I think around that time we had the Pershings being deployed.
Yeah, and crews in the UK as well.
Right.
I think when you were letting me know before, you're taken to Frankfurt train station, aren't you?
It was our ship out day, and we had a formation, a muster, and then, you know, some NCO is calling out your name, checking your orders. She'll say, get on that bus or get on that Jeep or wait right here. And they're all mentioning places that have the units, and they're being picked up and they're moving on. And they call my name. And it was an E7, a big guy. And he said, are you Alzaga? And I don't have the balls to correct him. You know, my last name is Alzaga. But I said, yes, Sergeant. You wait right here. Yes, Sergeant. So I'm waiting right there, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes. And he said, well, we're taking you to the train station. Your unit's up north. There's no one here to come get you. I'm like, what? It's like, okay. So it was a little van, just, you know, some private. Get on. We're going to train station, you know, smoking cigarettes, smoking and joking. And he says, good luck. I said, okay, thank you. So here I am, maybe 19 or 20 years old in Frankfurt station, train station. Hustle and bustle. I mean, you hear all kinds of languages. You see a lot of military people. So, and there's signs everywhere at the time. You know, U.S. military personnel, report, blah, blah, blah. So I go to this little, like, office, and I show my orders, and they were, I think, also operated by German civilians. They were very nice. Oh, would you like some coffee? Would you like a donut? Well, you get on track so-and-so, and your training is at this time. And don't forget to set your watch. We're on such and such a time. I said, okay. So I got on the train, never been on a train in my life, not even in California. And the train this is maybe in the afternoon, is going up north. And I'll remember seeing Meppen train station. And I didn't have a map, and I couldn't Google it, obviously, or use Google Earth. Yeah. So cool. But I just remember standing up and smoking a cigarette and looking out the windows and just seeing, like, the Rhine River and the castles. I remember going through a bunch of little villages and stopping, and, you know, people boarding, and most of them were very nice. And it was starting to get late, and I was still on that train. And then I realized, like, God, I'm the only American on here. And that was pretty much the case, but it didn't dawn on me until, like, maybe 5 or 6 hours later. And then I remember clearly writing down where else to get off. So I got off in a little village called Meppen, Meppen, which is way up north, close probably to the Dutch border. And I got off, and I'm already thinking, okay, there's signs here that must say U.S. personnel call this number, like all the big bases do, even back in those days. And I'm literally there by myself, and it's cold. And I guess it just snowed. And I didn't have anybody to call. They didn't give me any numbers, nothing. And the train station was closed at the time. I remember there was, like, I think it was at 10 p.m. The Bahnhof closed, but there was, you know, trains to still arrive back and forth, like the concessions, the ticket office closed. And I'm starting to get nervous. You know, I'm sitting there. I don't know who to call. Even if I did, I mean, I don't know how to use those payphones over there. Yeah. So maybe an hour later, this gray, funny-looking vehicle. They were called Safaris in America, made by Volkswagen back in the 70s, early 80s. Well, it's gray, and it's got the Bundeswehr logo, and a guy with a red beret comes out and in broken English starts saying, "Bist du ein Amerikaner Soldaten? Du musst mit mir jetzt kommen, bitte." You know, and I'm like, "What?" I understood bitte. And he said, "You American soldier must come with me." I'm like, "No, I'm American. I'm waiting for the American chief." And he's going, "Nein, nein, nein. Ich bin dein Confidant." He's saying, you know, "I'm here to pick you up. I'm your driver." And, and well, I had no choice. So I said, okay, jawohl. I threw my duffel bag in the back and, you know, offered him a cigarette. And I was hoping, you know, I wasn't very religious at the time, but I'm praying I'm going to the right place or I'm not going to get in trouble. I don't want to be kind of AWOL. That was my biggest fear if I was AWOL. So, you know, he starts talking, yeah, you come with us. We have American soldiers. So I started feeling at ease. And it's, I think, late at night. Beautiful countrysides, too. You know, the reflection of the moon on the rivers. Like I said, I just fell in love with Germany right away, and the people, and the culture, and the food. And maybe about 2 hours later, we got to a little town. We passed a lot of towns on the way, and we got to a place called Doelman, which is in the British sector at the time. It was just west of Münster and north of Essen, part of the British Corps, North Ag, Northern Army Group. And we passed a British base, but I was going maybe 15 kilometers down the road to the German base, and it was a German Army base, Santa Barbara Kaserne. Santa Barbara, the patron saint of artillery. I didn't know it at the time.
I didn't even know artillery had a patron saint, to be fair. But
yeah. So they checked my ID, and I saw the American flag there, so I felt more at ease. And they had the German flag it's clear, the West German flag at the time. And then we go down the base, make a few turns, and I see an American flag. I think they were taking it down or it was lit up or something, but I saw an American flag and I felt happy. And I got to what was called the 81st USAFAD, United States Field Artillery Detachment. And I wasn't too sure what was going on. I thought there was a mistake until the following morning. I mean, they fed me chow, and I bunked down like in the day room because there wasn't a room assigned for me. I came in so late. But the following morning, you know, the first sergeant greeted me. It was very nice, very casual, actually. He told me what our mission was, that we were supposed to assemble, safeguard, and deliver low-yield nuclear rounds to the German Army. And I believe it was either the 5th or the 7th German Army Artillery Regiment. I have the little emblem in my memory box, but I can't remember the nomenclature or the unit. And that was our job. And when we weren't doing that, we were to guard the nukes downrange. And so we had a site away from the base, and it's those old, it looks like a dirt mound basically, with a big steel metal doors, and that's where the rounds were kept. And and you know what? I can't remember all the details, even if I wanted to, because it was all secret at the time. But that was our mission. And I'm like, oh, well, that's why they asked me that question. So there I was in Germany for the second time, and it wasn't what I expected. I thought I was going to go to a regular line unit, you know, with an American battalion or division. But I made the mistake, or maybe not the mistake looking back, of saying, no, I don't care. I'll work with nukes.
Well, this is an unusual role. And when you say assemble, I'm imagining that a regular artillery round has explosive in it. So a nuclear artillery round has to be put together differently?
Yes, exactly. A conventional artillery round is pretty much already packed and made for you. All you got to do is take the cardboard and the wood packings off of it, take off the cap, like with an Allen wrench, and screw on the fuse and set the fuse to whatever time or designation that needs to go off on.
Yeah.
And then you put a fuse bag and you cut it put it behind there, and you're done. But what I came to find out was nuclear artillery rounds, at least low yield nuclear artillery rounds, came in different pieces. And I was trying to remember the other day, and maybe the FBI is going to show up my door tomorrow or something. But for the life of me, I can't remember. It was in parts, and they were boxed separately, like these big, ugly metal containers, and there was a humidifier in there, and they read you the temperature, and they were sealed. And there was a process. It was called tech ops, technical operations, where basically you did everything by the book with somebody there with you at all times. And it was like a two-man check. To double check you double check him, vice versa. And if I recall, the pieces were housed in different bunkers. And then when we simulated, because we never actually built the live rounds, nuclear round, when I was there, I left there in 85. We would simulate, but we did get to actually see them, and we did work with them. We had to actually check the temperatures and make sure everything was locked up and sealed. We had to do maintenance checks on them. And there were these big, ugly olive drab containers, and they were housed separately, like maybe they were in 3 or 4 pieces, and then the fuse. And then once it was built, it was an officer was come by and sign it over to the German officer, and then they pop one off over the border maybe. But that was the process. The tech ops, again, Ian, please accept my apologies. I don't remember.
No, but, and I absolutely appreciate that. I mean, I'm asking for a stupid level of detail. It's just that I'm fascinated because I'd heard of nuclear artillery rounds, but I don't know what they are. I don't know how they, how they work or differ. Obviously, there's a bigger bang and a lot more damage, but Yeah,
most of our days are training on them or doing maintenance in and around them, in addition to, like the regular infantry type training, because we're supposed to guard them. So the emphasis was also on infantry training, marksmanship and stuff. But I recall they came in different containers, and there was a very specific process of how to build it and how to check it. And there was no room for error. There was somebody always there, even if it was a practice. And there was a very clear procedure set in place for the release of a nuclear round. And, again, I'm a little older now. Maybe I'm a specialist by now. So I'm a little more in tune to what's going on, a little more experience. But I also remember this, and we were going to use nuclear low-yield rounds first in the event Warsaw Pact came across the Fulda Gap or the Northern Plains. And that was our focus there, the Northern Plains around Hanover, just a flatland. And there was no bones about that. We were always told that. It's like, we're going to be overrun. We will be using nukes first. And I don't know if that's news to anybody or in contradiction of protocol, but the way I think our mentality was, by the time we react to an invasion, there's going to be a lot of people dead already. And the reforger, that takes 12, 18 hours to at least get you from your bases in America to the actual battlefield in Germany. And I remember that being made very clear that we would be the first to use, if we had to stop an invasion. So that was a sombering feeling that, we would be doing that. But, we trained on that. And at the same time, technology was also changing. They were talking about, well, these are out of date. We have the Pershings coming in. We have all this other stuff being in the works. But, you still had to train on it. And if there's going to be some kind of transition, they would train us on that. But it was all very primitive looking back, all that equipment. Even the communication was very primitive. So that's what I recall about nuclear artillery pieces. They were there. We had them in country, and people knew it.
And this was the 155 millimeter shell?
Yes, 155, the M109. It was that artillery piece. And also, the bigger one, the 8-inch for the M110, and the Germans had the same artillery pieces. They had better tanks, I thought. That's a different discussion, because I heard some of your podcasts on armor, which I find fascinating. But in terms of artillery, the Bundeswehr, they had the same ones we did. They had the M110 and the M109, and that were interchangeable. So I think that was also part of the plan. We can interchange equipment and ammunition if we had to.
I've just done a quick search on the internet, which is not always a good thing. And it looks like the yield on them was around 1 kiloton.
I don't remember.
No, don't worry about that. And also there was a mode where it could be used with enhanced radiation, which was popularly known as the neutron bomb.
Yeah.
As well. So don't worry. I know it's a long time back. You were saying to me that everybody around there knew that you had nuclear weapons in that base.
Oh yeah. In fact, like I was saying, I was in a village, a little town called Dulman, and the British were, I think, on the east side with their camp, and we were in the German caserne. And then downrange, maybe 20 kilometers in a beautiful deep forest, was the actual storage bunkers. So we would commute back and forth like on 24-hour shifts to guard those nukes with the Germans. We were internal, and the Germans were there basically in charge, if you will. But we were there to monitor them. And to go back to your question, we used to have protests outside the gates. And it was really funny because, me and my buddies, we would know some of these people from the pubs and the gas houses. And we wave at each other, hey, and then we'd go downtown because we had a lot of free time when I was there. And I remember people asking us, like, what's down there? And we were supposed to say nothing. And I remember one time getting drunk and saying to somebody who we thought was a spy, we didn't know. I mean, we didn't know the guy. We said, yeah, we have 500 Fallschirmspringers in the Kaserne. And I said, we have 400 airborne rangers stationed there, ready to go. And that was the farthest thing from the truth. And he took it seriously.
Yeah.
So me and my buddy, we reported that. We called that little number. We told our first sergeant, it's like, oh, this guy and stupid Alzaga told him that we had 400 and he was lying. And the first one said, well, at least he told a good lie, because that's the farthest thing from the truth. But yeah, they knew it was out there. How? Who knows? We were tight-lipped about it. But they knew we had nukes there. They didn't know probably exactly which kind. I'm thinking they did the math. There's an artillery unit here. There's a bunker downrange. Go figure. But they knew we had something, and I remember getting protests, and we had to go, on extra guard duty because the Pershings were coming in, not to our location. We had no idea where they were going, but there were protesting out there that we had Pershings, and we were to say nothing.
Yeah.
Luckily, I didn't get written up for being a dumbass, but it was like the worst kept secret in that town that there was nukes there.
Yeah. Well, it was it's unusual to have a U.S. artillery detachment so far away from the rest of the U.S. Army as well.
Right. And there was maybe 30 of us Americans. And like I said, the Bundeswehr treated us really good. I still keep in touch with a couple of those guys via Facebook, which is kind of cool. But, we reminisce.
I'm looking for some Bundeswehr people to interview, so...
I can probably put you in touch with a buddy of mine.
I'd be interested in doing that. You said you were on guard duty. I mean, what were your instructions as far as if you had intruders?
Right. There was different perimeters that were set up to guard nukes. We were in the internal perimeter, which means we had the keys and access to the actual bunkers. No one else did. And that was, I think it was called perimeter A or inner perimeter. And there was a middle perimeter, which is like two fences. And the Bundeswehr troops would walk that. And they stay within the fences. And then the Polizei, and they weren't there, but the plan was if something did go down, and it did, the Polizei would be called. They'd be on the outside of the fence. Our mission was basically if anybody came in that had no authorization, and we had names of all the German soldiers, and it was like this old revolving door system that you had to open and close electronically. And if anybody was in there, we were supposed to shoot to kill. And we did have live ammunition for that. In fact, we would do the ammo count like every morning when you switched over or when you were relieved of duty. We did have live ammunition, and the Germans had their, I think it was a G3 rifle, beautiful rifle. And we had the M16 Alpha 2. We also had the M203 grenade launcher. But it was very clear, and it was all well lit. And if someone was supposed to go in the perimeter, the German was supposed to let us know first, like, some maintenance or maintenance workers. There were civilian maintenance workers that would come in from the day and do the plumbing and mow the lawns. It was really wild. And but that happened in the daytime. But then when we stand down, that means nobody went in there, only American troops. We have to go there like, oh God, I don't know what it was. Every 30 minutes, two of us would have to put on our flak vests and our helmets and live ammo on safety, and we'd have to check the doors and check the perimeter every hour or 30 minutes, something like that. So we did it in shifts, and I think there was maybe 3 or 4 of us. There was an NCO in charge who did the radios, telephones, and had access to all the doors. And then we would do the rounds, basically, check the rounds on the rounds. And our mission was very clear. If anybody was in there, we were supposed to shoot them. But of course, then they would say, well, you have to communicate. And it was a very clear protocol with the Bundeswehr. Like, we're going to have 3 troops. Here's their IDs. They're going to go in there and they're going to rake leaves, or they're going to do some maintenance on the side of the bunker. But we would have to go with them. So it was always like, if someone was out there alone, we were to shoot them. And the funny thing was, well, maybe not funny then, but there was a lot of wild rabbits. And they'd pop up their little heads and run around, and you freak out. You want to shoot them. But, the sergeant who had more experience said, relax, private. Got it under control. If it don't belong or don't grow, you shoot it. So yeah, it was pretty clear. And there was also this plan that if we were under an actual attack and it was not a simulation, we were supposed to call, the tower, and they were supposed to dispatch like an elite unit. I don't know if this was true or not, but they were supposed to come in and parachute in and save the day. I don't know if that was true. Maybe the Bundeswehr guys could tell you more about that. But, I thought it was fascinating. I never saw that, but I thought it was a cool concept.
Yeah.
So, yeah, our mission was pretty simple. If you're not building it, you guard it. And if someone doesn't belong in there, you shoot. But then it got more political. Well, if you shoot, you got to have a password. One of them civilian clothing while you shoot. But then you ask for password. And luckily, we didn't have anyone breach the perimeter. We just had protesters outside, and they were pretty friendly for the most part. Maybe a few threw rocks, I don't know. But we never had our perimeter breached while I was there, so we didn't have to shoot anybody.
That's good. So how did you get on with your British friends up the road?
Wow, that was a love-hate relationship, Ian. When I got there was always tension. And not tension at the level of the government or the higher ranks of the officers. But here's what would happen. We'd go to the pubs and the discos, and we'd fight over girls. And, that was always an ongoing thing. And it was kind of funny because looking back, after we fought, we'd have a beer. Or, oh, Mike, here, have a faggot. And let me buy you the next round. Or vice versa. And we would fight over stupid things. Especially girls or Frauleins, they would just mess us all up. In terms of like actual, I hate you kind of thing, that did not happen. But there was a lot of little petty fights, and then the British police would be called on us, and we didn't have any MPs up there, so we kind of thought we had it made until we met like the Royal Police. I don't know what they were called, but
the Royal Military Police.
They would show us no pity. they'd whack us upside the head and take us to our first sergeant, and that's all there was to it. They wouldn't throw us in jail or anything. But it was more of a love-hate, stupid little thing. And we tried to do things. Our battery our battery commander, he was a captain. I forgot his name. But he married an English girl whose father was an officer down the road at the base, the British base. So he was always trying to smooth things over. Like we'd have a soccer game and then have a beer call. And those things were fun, It was just the stupid privates that fight over girls. That was really it. I remember we would bash each other, either just intentionally or just for fun. But sometimes, we would fight over stupid things. We would say things that were very inappropriate about the Queen, and they would say things very inappropriate about, Reagan or our moms. So hence, a fight would break out. And then here's the funny thing, Ian. It would have to be fast or outside, because if the police was called, then you were really in deep. We usually find the bathrooms or outside. And the following day, if you went downtown and you saw the guy, you just said nothing, or you got on with it. And again, I'm a big heavy metal fan, so I'd always be talking to the British troops about metal. And, well, I don't listen to that, mate. And I thought, well, all English people have to listen to heavy metal, Judas Priest and Black Sabbath, they're all from, UFO, they're all from England. So I found a few core friends, and it was funny because some of them were back in the Falklands, and I would have those discussions with them. But I always made that connection with the British troops, like, the metal bands. And then we'd go to Dortmund to go see Iron Maiden and have a beer and then get back on the train. There was one guy, I forgot his name, but we became pretty good friends, and he wrote for me for many years. I hope he was well and alive and happy. But it was more angst of youth and, hormones raging. And I admit, those Frauleins, they used to play us, So.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's changed down the years, to be honest. I mean, that's classic military history, I would say. So I think you left Germany in 1985. What happened with the rest of your military service?
Again, maybe about 4 or 5 months before you leave, you get orders. So I got orders to leave. Oh God, I'm trying to remember. It was in 85. I remember that. And the only reason I remember that, Ian, is because Live Aid was happening. And, it was a big thing at the time on MTV. And that's how I kind of do my timelines in my life, is what was happening in music. So I left Germany. It had to have been the spring or the summer of 85. And again, I went home on leave for a little bit. And then I was assigned to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I got to work with another type of unit, which was, again, a blessing looking back, because I had different experiences. I was assigned to the 18th Airborne Corps Artillery. It was Alpha Battery. I believe it was 5th of the 8th Artillery, or 8th of the 5th, something like that. And we were a 198 towed unit, which means we had the big towed guns that would be either airlifted by Chinook helicopters or on the back of not a Deuce and a Half. I think they were too small. It was a bigger truck after that. I forgot, maybe the 4-ton, if that existed. And our mission was to support the 82nd Airborne and whatever it is they did. And I remember when I got my orders, everyone said, "Oh, you're going airborne, you're going airborne." It's like, no, I'm not. Well, at first I was like, "Oh, yeah." And as it came close, I was like, I don't want to jump out of airplanes. That's crazy. So I was relieved when I got there. They didn't ask me any questions. They just said, "This is your unit. Here you go." It wasn't like when I got to Germany, and I was in a, quote, leg unit at Fort Bragg, which means you were not airborne. Mm-hmm. You were looked down upon. And I didn't know that rivalry existed until I got there. But it was fun because we had the big 198, and if the 82nd did something, we had a rotation of all the artillery units, and we're supposed to back them up, whether it be an exercise or an actual deployment. One time, we were on a 2-week alert. We used to have those rotations. You'd have to have everything packed, ready to go. And within that 2-week frame, no leaves were allowed. You couldn't leave base, and if you did, it couldn't be that far unless you lived off base and you were married. But we got deployed to Florida. No, wait, to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for exercise. But we never knew, and it was more real there. You actually got issued the live ammunition, and you actually flew somewhere, and half the time you didn't know where you were going, which I thought, looking back, was kind of fun. Now I'm petrified. But like we'd wind up at Fort Jackson one morning, and we'd do live fire to support, I don't know, the 325th Infantry from the 82nd Airborne. And we had the big guns. They had the little towed guns. I think they were called 105s, and we had the 198s, which is basically a 155 artillery round projectile. It's kind of same with the M109. I hope I'm not losing you.
No, I'm still there, just about.
Okay, so basically the 198 is a towed version of the M109 self-propelled gun. And our mission was the big guns to support them. And, you know, it was fun because you'd actually deploy somewhere with the rounds, live ammo, everything, to Fort Jackson. We went to somewhere in the desert in California one time. And there was always rumors, we're going to, I don't know, to Cuba or something. But obviously none of that came true. And I was there till I think it was 87. I enlisted for 6 years, and I was going to re-enlist, but number one, I wanted to go to college, and I never had even thought about that opportunity till I was going to re-enlist, and they said, well, you have this much money saved if you want to go to college. I'm like, really? So I got out of active service in 1987, I think it was, and I went back to the Los Angeles area, and I started college, Riverside City College, and I was also in the California National Guard, which is another story within itself. But every month we'd go up to a place called Camp Roberts and do live fire missions, which is great. You know, they had the money for that back in those days. So I did that, and then I got out of the National Guard in 1992. And by that time, personally, I was done with the military. I wanted to grow my hair out. I wanted to be a teacher. You know, I had like Viva la raza kind of mentality going in my head. I got married. I got offered a teaching job. And so for many years, I taught special education. And then I moved to Albuquerque. And then I started teaching and going to school. So the military was good for me. I got to go to school. I got 3 degrees for free, basically. My hearing is off. I'm fighting with the VA about that. But for me, it was a good thing. And I miss the camaraderie. I miss just the no excuse kind of attitude. It's like, we're going to get this done, in the story. Yeah. And let's do it. And I still keep in touch with some of the old guys I knew via Facebook and so forth. But I do miss it, but then life goes on. I just didn't want to keep moving around a lot, I guess. It's one of the main things I got out. It's like I wanted to settle down somewhere.
Yeah, you never know where you're going to be at any point in time, really, do you, when you're in the military?
Right. And, some people got married and made a career out of it, and they moved with their wives, and that was great, but I didn't have that opportunity. But again, I have no regrets. Well, maybe I do. I should have maybe gone the officer route, looking back. Because, I love the military, and I had more of an interest in it as I got older. But outside of that, I loved my time in the military. I had a great time. It was good to me. Especially as a son of Mexican immigrants. Yeah.
Don't miss the episode extras such as videos, photos, and other content. Just look for the link in the podcast information. The podcast wouldn't exist without the generous support of our financial supporters, and I'd like to thank one and all of them for keeping the podcast on the road. The Cold War conversation continues in our Facebook discussion group. Just search for Cold War Conversations in Facebook. Thanks very much for listening, and see you next week.